This is Autistic Exposé number 2. As a reminder, I am recording and numbering these newest videos so that if you want, you can watch them in chronological order. They're not necessarily chronological order in the way of telling a story from start to finish necessarily, like childhood up to present time, but they are chronological in a way that I'm laying certain things out. And while I do understand that some will choose to watch in more a la carte fashion, which is why I also will repeat certain things. At the same time, if you don't know what I'm talking about, a certain term that I use or a certain reference that I make to something I said before or something that happened to me in the past, then it's most likely in one of the videos prior to the one you're listening to. So just look for the number. I'm calling the series Reflection on the Spectrum. And then there's kind of a sub-series or a mini-series or a spin-off within that called Autistic Exposé. So Autistic Exposé is also numbered within the larger scheme of reflection on the spectrum. Autistic exposés, even though this entire channel, in particular the neurodivergent and autistic topics, is to reveal a little more behind the scenes or what it's like to be me, an inside look a little more. So even though the whole channel is basically that, the autistic exposés contain more focused in one of the more common categories that's talked about and experienced in the neurodivergent community and by autistic people, with even more specific examples from my life, either now or in the past, or both. So today I want to talk about tics and stims. And every time I've been saying that in my mind, I just keep getting some combination of sticks and stems and twigs and limbs. So the title might end up being some sort of Winnie the Pooh-esque, Dr. Seuss-esque play on words like that. And for another conversation, another time, one of my special interests is linguistics and grammar, and I actually have quite profound, mystical, if you will, contemplations, realizations around language and words. And I do believe I have echolalia, but it might show up in a different way for me than the way I hear others describing theirs. So maybe that can be another autistic expose, but I gave you a little preface and hint here because I'm mulling over the title for this video and the subject being tics and stims. In an earlier video, I said that this particular rocking motion that I was doing during the video was the only stim that I know of that I do or that I still do. Number one, I need to clarify, I didn't necessarily plan on pointing that out. I saw myself on the computer screen doing it, and I thought that was an interesting opportunity to kind of mention something about that movement that I was doing. The reason that I said it was the only known of stim was also a little premature and a half-baked thought. So if any of you watched that and thought, yeah, right, there's no way that's true, you'd be right. Which is why I kind of stopped there and didn't chase that rabbit down the hole or the trail and continued with what else I was talking about with my own tab, mental note, ... to get back to that later, which is another reason why watching these in chronological order is a good idea. It is a rough sketch, as I've said, but I am proud of and stand by everything that I put out. But each subsequent video may build on or comment on a previous one. So it would be an unfinished perspective for you to not see them all and put them in your mind in chronological order. Yeah, chronicological. Chronically illogical. How about that? Chronicological is chronically illogical. Which in a lot of ways is how my brain works. Another story for another time as well, because the stereotype is autistic people only think logically and linearly. So the reason I still kind of have a challenge talking about stimming is because when I most definitely had what I would call an extreme, severe, debilitating, incredibly pathological, disorderly manifestation of obsessive compulsive disorder. As a child, let's just say I was diagnosed at 8, first symptoms at 7, and then a series of doctors and different things like that culminated in the diagnosis and then medication at 8. And then through, as I've said, deep inner work, the kind of clinically diagnosable, excuse me one moment, clinically diagnosable hugely mosquito. We live in an area where it is currently, and about 6 weeks out of the year every summer, vampire apocalypse in the form of tiny mosquitoes everywhere, swarming everywhere in a way that feels personal. It is a personal attack on sanity and humanity. Okay. A lot of suffering caused by my clinically diagnosed and diagnosable OCD. That lasted from 7 years old to '25. 2010-ish. If in 2010, so 86, 96, 06, 20, yeah, so 24-ish, okay? 24-ish, when OCD subsided. And autism is what was left over, which is what kind of led me to discover that. Because I knew it wasn't OCD, but something felt kind of like OCD. It was still quite challenging and different in my system. And I knew it was more than just a quote unquote HSP, highly sensitive person, even though I identified with that as well. But I had a lot of what I used to call tics that I associated with OCD in the clinical sense, clinical context. But as I started studying and researching in healing arts and understanding of energy and the nervous system. Studying and practicing yoga, meditation, receiving body work, and teaching and offering those things as well, becoming trained and certified in those modalities myself. The interpretation that I had kind of carried for a long time regarding what happened to me when I was 7 years old in the kind of mystical, spiritual awakening experience that I'll give a fuller explanation of another time. It deserves its own sort of thing. Is that when that happened, my 7-year-old body, mind, persona, psyche, nervous system, brain was not prepared to handle, process, hold, contain, integrate the high voltage of what came into me or awakened in me, however you perceive of it. I kind of perceive of it as both. And of course, on the positive side, that initiated the most significant transformational journey of my life. So, in one sense, my 7-year-old system was never meant to hold that or contain that or process it appropriately. I was meant to unpack it over the next 20 plus years, even until now, and as long as I'm here. But on the kind of negative byproduct or side effect side of things, what I say is that it short-circuited my system, like blew a transformer or a fuse or blew a lot of fuses. I'm no electrician and I don't know a lot of the lingo and jargon around that, but that's what makes sense to me. Or consider a voltage going into some wires that aren't insulated or don't have protection around them, or into some wires that aren't strong enough to receive that transmission. So for a long time, it felt very fragmented, glitchy. My whole system, physically, mentally, energetically, spiritually, etc., emotionally. And one of the ways that manifested was through what I called tics. And in the autistic community and videos that I've seen and watched, often what I called tics I have heard others call harmful stims. Now, is there research on what's the difference? Maybe, I'm sure. But I'm more inclined to just tell my experience and see if you can relate and see what you think, see what your definition is, see what you philosophize around it. So, what I called tics and what you could also call harmful stims were things like, and I'm actually not gonna do them because they bring up maybe PTSD. They bring up very uncomfortable memories with even a slight subtle fear that's just a thought. It's not like I really believe they're gonna come back, but because they were so intense and uncomfortable and painful, and I actually was aware that I was out of control of them, and that was scary, that I don't even like to do them now, even to like show my wife what I used to do. Because there's a memory that gets triggered and then a fear that I'm going to start doing it again. But I must tell you that not doing them anymore is not because I'm white knuckling and suppressing. And I'd like to tell you what I mean by that as well sometime, this video or another, about my experience in therapy and what was suggested and how it never worked. But I'm going to describe some of them. Without showing you. So one is beneath my tongue. I think everyone has that kind of little piece of skin, cartilage, whatever it is that kind of attaches your tongue to the bottom of your mouth. Mine is very pronounced. Like it's like a a very obvious, noticeable partition, and it actually prevents me from being able to move my tongue around very far at all. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this runs in my family. I think it's genetic. And autism in my family is another conversation for another time as well. But I used to stick my tongue out at least as far as it could go, which was not very far, and stick that and like slide that thing through the gap in my bottom two teeth. And the gap in my bottom two teeth is not very wide. So I would actually kind of force it through. Just multiple times all the time throughout the day, until that piece was very inflamed and swollen and red and hurting, and that would probably be the only thing that would get me to kind of stop for a week or two and then start back up again. I also had I called it like crossing my eyes, but it wasn't the crossing of the eyes where the eyes like look look towards your nose. I'm not even going to do that, even though I can. I don't like to do that, but it's not that thing where everybody can kind of cross your eyes and look to the middle of your face. Not that one, but it was a very specific contraction of my eye muscles that made everything go blurry and almost made the physical room and also my eyes, if you were to look at my eyeballs, kind of vibrate. It would kind of vibrate and shake everything in my eyes. I had a movement that I did with my head. I'm doing the very rudimentary beginning of it right now. Head and neck. It was always to this side. Basically sliding my chin as far forward as I could, creasing the back of my neck very firmly, pretty hard and forcefully. I would clench my jaws all the way back to the back teeth, both sides, as hard as I could. There are definitely others, but even right now, it's bringing up all kinds of feelings for me. So I'll pause there for now. As I said in another video, one of my psychologists later in my kind of like later teenage years told me that Tourette's syndrome was like a cousin related to OCD. And that made a lot of sense to me because both have characteristics of like uncontrollable behaviors. OCD is uncontrollable thoughts and behaviors, or OCD is uncontrollable thoughts that you have control over the behavior, but if you don't do the behavior, the thought won't go away. So you're kind of forced into the controllable behavior. Whereas I guess Tourette's is more of an uncontrollable behavior, an uncontrollable compulsion. And so because those tics were actually quite uncontrollable without causing considerable discomfort in trying to not do them, then it made sense to me that those were related to OCD. And they were harmful and they were hurtful. They hurt me, in fact. There's other kind of interior or mental maybe we could call them stims that I think I'll save for another time, or mental compulsions. I want to focus today on kind of the more physically manifesting movements and classically recognized tics and stims, in effort to not only, as I've said, expose myself, but also to try to make a distinction, because I think there is. If you'll recall, in other videos, I have said OCD most certainly began when I was 7 years old, like right on the heels, like within weeks after this very positive and mysterious, mystical encounter that I had. But over the years, before I understood or discovered autism, I would look back and think, well, before OCD, before 7 years old, I still was very different and very sensitive and had very difficult time in preschool and kindergarten. Those are two pretty traumatic years that I remember, like 3-year-old preschool, 4-year-old preschool, and kindergarten. First grade is kind of like a blur. Then second grade is when a lot of craziness started. But in my kindergarten school picture that I have here and there and everywhere, actually, I think I'm going to go get it and show you. Yeah, because I had this image in my mind of like a documentary or something where they flash up the the high school yearbook or whatever of the person they're talking about. And I realized, oh, I can go get that right over there. So this is my kindergarten picture. I'm covering up some information that I want to keep private for now. Oh man. So, do you see anything interesting around my mouth? That red ring, which is mostly on the bottom, but some on the top, was from constantly licking my lips in a very pronounced way, like tongue all the way out and a full lick, not just kind of tongue moving around here and there and playing. Very systematized, deliberate lick of top and bottom, tongue all the way out and pulled back in all at once. So not only that probably looked strange to people, but it ended up being perpetually chapped lips and painful. I remember that being painful. And my mom, giving me like Vaseline, Aquaphor, like things beyond mere chapstick. But interestingly enough, I then developed a kind of codependency on chapstick, and chapstick became like a security blanket, actually. Whew, this is bringing up some stuff for me. Exposé, y'all. Where I would have to carry chapstick in my pocket everywhere I went, or I would have mild anxiety. Chapstick and or some version of skin lubricant. And later as an adult, I made a conscious effort to, and also applying chapstick multiple times all throughout the day when they weren't really chapped, but maybe they were. And just in case, and if I was getting ready to walk into a meeting or getting ready to be in front of somebody that I didn't feel like I could apply it in front of, then I just go ahead and do it just in case. And also this kind of autistic gauge that I think a lot of us deal with, like, well, I don't know if I need it or not. I don't know if my lips are chapped or not. So I just do it on a regular rule-based routine just in case, or just to make sure, or the slightest kind of thought about, oh, maybe are my lips oh, I guess they are. So anyway, that the reason I'm bringing that one up specifically is because later on in life, really understanding and healing OCD, mental illness disorder, medication, what happened to me as a kid, etc., I would remember all of these other things, all these other difficulties, all these other manifestations that were there before 7, but that I couldn't attribute to OCD. That being one of them. Why was I licking my lips all the time? That's strange. That's not OCD. Definitely not. I didn't have all the other OCD things then. And for other conversation another time, also meltdowns as a young child before 7 years old. So that was one of the cues that there was something else besides OCD. Behavioral therapy, I think that's what it's called. Behavioral therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think there's slight difference between the two, but behavioral therapy, I'll just say it like this, is probably the only supplemental strategy that any of my psychiatrists or psychologists suggested, which was a huge fail. The only things that ever worked for me were things that I discovered on my own, figured out in myself, or were connected to the spiritual journey or deep interior work, not even like psychologically interior work. I mean, it was psychologically, but I mean not in the context of like with a psychologist. It was in the context of the spiritual journey, healing the psyche. But behavioral therapy would look something like, whatever the thing is that you have a hard time controlling and causes problems and harm and that you don't want to do anymore, set a timer. And when you feel the urge, the need, the compulsion to do it, set a timer and don't do it for 30 seconds. And then after 30 seconds, you can do it as much as you want. And then next time, set a timer for 1 minute. And if you successfully don't do it for 1 minute, then you can do it as much as you want. And just increase it. Number one, there was like so many things happening at once that I wanted to try to not do. And so like holding them all back at the same time was like damming up a waterfall. But also it made, like the classic example, don't think about a white elephant. And what are you thinking about? Or in my other work, only that which is arising in your awareness exists. Try to think of something not arising in your awareness. Whoa. So, or in sports, when I played basketball, it was coached to not have the thought, like, don't miss it, because what you're actually telling yourself is miss it. For some reason, that don't creates like a negative vacuum. There's a lot of studies on this sort of thing. But rather positive affirmations like make it increases the success rate. That was another one, opening my mouth really wide, that would eventually end in cracks in the corners of my mouth. But I still do that, I think, in more of a stimming kind of way. That's why I didn't throw it in the category of tics. Another one was crossing my fingers in strange patterns. And I don't want to do that now because that was also, it was coming from, I can tell when it's coming from constricted, contracted energy. That's another way that I like to describe it from more of a spiritual, energetic perspective, that whatever happened to me when I was 7 years old amplified my energy body. And my energy body, my spiritual body, was way bigger than, more developed than, further along than, more active than my physical. And so the way it translated through the physical was all kinds of herky-jerky movements and behaviors and not knowing how to operate the system. And so if you understand Kundalini awakening or energy moving up the spine, not just in a moment of that kind of experience, but over time of developing consciousness, using the chakra system as a metaphor to understand it, not just cognitive, not just cognitive realizations of things and being able to intellectualize it, but actually in your consciousness, in your body, there's correlations and parallels. So as it moves up through and out the crown of your head, I actually believe that whatever happened to me when I was 7 came in through the crown and the heart, came in through both and all the way down, and then was such a potent and powerful and strong force that has required a lot of work to manage and contain and control and grow beyond and grow bigger than and grow able to hold it and able to channel it actually consciously now rather than it controlling me. And that again is through physical and nervous system and mental and everything. You have to grow beyond it to give it space to come into and move how it wants. I intentionally took that side trail because I wanted to say all that, but let me get back to where I was. So, doing things that I knew were not OCD, harmful, tics. Oh, right. Behavior therapy. It made the thing in saying set a timer and don't do it. Don't do it for this amount of time. And then you can do it as much as you want. Was also why that sort of thing never worked in healing my addiction that I had. Not and then do it however much you want, not that part, but just try not to do it, try not to do it, don't do it, don't do it, try not to do it. Longer amount of time, longer amount of time, longer amount of time. I applied that technique to my addiction for a time because it was the only thing I kind of knew because the doctors told me it worked, even though I knew it really didn't work. I didn't know what else to do until deeper, higher emergences came online. And they naturally fall away. That's the point of this. So just like all other of my OCD symptoms simply fell away. Now, some I most definitely had to apply effort to not do, or effort to do something else, or effort in cultivating a way of being or moving or perceiving or whatever. I had to apply some effort to all of the practices, techniques, strategies that I was implementing for sure. That's why I keep saying it wasn't easy. It's been a lot of hard work. But that's not the same as just white knuckling, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Through my process, I actually have recollections of kind of like the cliche, I just woke up one morning and it was gone. One at a time, one at a time, one after another, one after another. The interior obsessive part of it and the exterior compulsion. Where the compulsion used to be there, it just wasn't. So again, the behavior or giving into the compulsion is voluntary, but it's close to involuntary because of the intensity inside that happens if you don't do the thing. I call it the OC demon. I don't actually think it was an entity like a negative, evil, dark possession or something like that, but it feels like that, the OC demon, or the inner gunman. I've said the gunman holding a gun to your head I'll take the gun away if you do this thing. And then you do that thing, and he just puts the gun behind his back and then brings it out another time. It just reinforces it, in other words. But through calming the nervous system, expanding my mind body persona complex container, introspection, and knowing myself, through, did I just say this? Yoga, meditation, body work, which is massage therapy, energy healings, even chiropractic and acupuncture can be helpful, and I've received over the years. One at a time, the OCD symptoms simply were not there anymore. And the compulsion, that's why it's not necessarily Tourette's, because Tourette's would be like an involuntary, uncontrollable movement. This is the compulsion for the voluntary movement was no longer there, did not arise anymore. And the freedom experienced in that absence, without actually any longer a belief that it's going to come back, or if I did succeed in going however long, however many days on the clock that I was trying behavior therapy, it would just come right back. But this time, knowing it's just gone, that's freedom, and that's interesting to describe, because also people can experience kind of circumstantial subsiding of symptoms where things don't arise anymore, but it's because your life is not triggering them anymore. My doctors used to ask, do your OCD symptoms increase when you're bored or busy, basically, when you have a lot going on or when you don't have anything going on? And for me, it was always when I have a lot going on. And actually, right now in my life, I have probably the most going on that I ever have, and am the most healed, calm, stable, relaxed, present, grounded, etc. than I've ever been. That's for a conversation another time as well. But along with the tics, or if you want to say harmful stims, there are others that I think would fall more into the category of stimming, that are harmless or neutral and self-regulating. Some of which I still do, and you've probably seen some of them. My eyebrows, my eyes, things in my face. Those just kind of happen. They don't annoy me. Sometimes it can tip over into like, I got to get it just right before I stop. Okay, that's good. And then that turns into a little like, wish I didn't have to do that. But when it just kind of happens on its own, I do that sometimes, but it's not the harmful kind. And some of this perhaps is a carryover from OCD. It's remnants. I mean, neuroplasticity is a thing. My brain has been healed and changed and rewired, but I think there's still tiny little grooves, when a gushing riverbed dries up, and eventually over hundreds and thousands of years, it's not a river anymore, but there's still a crease, a crack in the ground where it used to be. I'm fine with that. So I'll make some more videos later on what I understand healing to be, how I've misunderstood it in the past, how to know what can or should go away and what's a thorn in the flesh for the grace of God to be revealed, something to work on, and what's just a unique trait and characteristic, even if it's a little weird and different and sometimes challenging to work with. I do a kind of a compression, like on CPR when somebody's doing that to the chest of another person. I kind of do that on my own chest. And see, these I don't mind doing and kind of showing you because it's not those tics or the harmful ones that were associated with all that pent up and distorted and short circuited energy. I kind of have like a spine movement that I do, and shoulder blades, left, right kind of thing. I played percussion in the middle school band, and there's a warm up drill called a paradiddle, which, if you have your drumsticks, it's right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. So I still do that kind of like paradiddle thing, either with my fingers, kind of like this, like da 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 da. And the idea is to go like faster and faster and faster and keep it under control. If you can't do it fast and be relaxed and under control, then that would not be successful. But relaxed and fast, and a stim is typically, understood as like a stimulus response. So if there's like stimulus overload, then the person does the stim in order to regulate the system. That's not really what mine are. Unless it's just kind of because my system feels unregulated on a regular basis just by living life, or dysregulated, so I have to kind of do certain things. But that's very subconscious if that's the case. I'm not aware of that being the case. However, a lot of even these stims subside when I'm in deep periods of my life where I'm able to focus more deeply on meditation and fasting and those kind of things. Even these stims just kind of subside and are not there. I no longer clench my jaw and I used to also grind my teeth, like actually grind and grind and grind. Now I kind of tap my teeth together in that paradiddle pattern, right, left, right, left. It's not always right, left, right, but it comes from the paradiddle. Tap my teeth, but I don't grind or clench anymore. Tap. Clearing my throat like that. I do another throat clear I won't do now. It's like a routine I do before I lay down in bed at night. It's like I feel like I just have to do that. My toes, I'm doing my toes in that pattern right now, actually. And so what I'm saying is, before I really understood autism, I wondered why those few are still there. And I thought, oh, it's just kind of a mild version of the tics I used to have because the groove was there for so long. But actually, I think I now understand the difference between sticks and stems, between twigs and limbs. And this is also to tell you that through healing arts and spiritual practice and deep inner work, the painful ones can go away. The out of control ones can go away. I think out of control is different than spontaneous and autonomous. They just kind of happen but don't cause a disruption in your system. And if you can feel it's more just kind of a part of your smooth flow. We're not talking about if other people think they look strange or not. If it's a part of your smooth flow of life and not a spike from a contracted, out of whack system. And I'm also not saying those are wrong or demonized, or I'm just saying it is possible to heal those. And then what's left, or what you had before they arrived, I almost said arose, and what remain after are possibly simply unique energies moving through your system that you might not even realize the significance that they have for you energetically. I'll do another one on eye contact sometime and the energetic and even spiritual implications of that and how this system works. We're learning how to operate our system here. And in an optimal, ideal, or self-realized version or manifestation of it, it's you being in healthy, relaxed, conscious control in a way that works for you, not somebody else's standards, in a way that works for you, being in control and understanding how to optimally work with what you got, what you've been given, which I believe has the potential to be highly advanced, refined, sophisticated, but we're just at the beginning stages of figuring that out. But the more of us who tinker with it and are able to articulate it and share it, it adds to the mosaic of the kaleidoscope of the spectrum and the potential that this possibly, just throwing it out there, take it or leave it, genetic mutation that's arriving, appearing, has limitless possibilities. Thanks for listening. Till next time.